Hello and welcome to busyworksbeats.com. This is the house series where you get to learn how to create house songs from scratch. Okay, we're on part 3 now. This is the chord section. In this video, we're going to add a piano to the song and build out a chord progression to go along with the song. Now, in part 2, we went over parts of the chords, or like chord hints, when we were creating the pad swell. It's a little inside joke for those who remember the pad swell. So, there were a couple chords we used, but it wasn't a full kind of chord progression. Now, chord progressions in house music are common, but in general, in a lot of dance music, you don't really have very dynamic chord progressions because you're trying to keep the listener engaged in the mood. You're not trying to take them on a big journey. You take them on the journey lyrically or through the energy of the track. You don't take them on the journey through the chord progression in dance music in general. Okay. So chord progressions, you're not going to come up with 1,000 chords for a dance song. You might have 2 or 3 chords or 1 or 2 chords. Okay, so there's different ways to play them as well. So let's open up Nexus, another one of you guys' favorite plugins that we're starting to incorporate in more videos. I understand you guys want to see it more. So let's open up Nexus. We're going to pull up a piano from Nexus. So let's go to piano. Let's go to grand piano. Let's hit Control L. Again, this series is not about using internal plugins from FL Studio or Image Line. This is about using third-party plugins. We'll have another series going over just Image Line plugins, okay, for those who are wondering. So let's go over the Nexus plugin, and let's create a chord progression. Now remember, we are in the A natural minor scale or the C major scale, okay? And if you want to understand what scales are, keys of songs, chords, we have a whole course called Music Theory in a Day. We cover that so that you can understand the fundamentals of music theory. So what I don't like doing is just giving you information and not showing you where I got it from. But we have a course which shows you what that knowledge is. So I'm clearing up for those who are just watching as beginners. Again, this series is more advanced. You could, even in the sound design in part 2, there were a lot of advanced techniques. So this isn't really for beginners, but for people who want to understand what house music's all about. So anyway, pattern 17, let's open up Nexus and let's get into the chord progression. So let's add it down here. Let's call it chord progression. Now I'm going to show you a way today to create what seems like moving chords from very similar chords. It may be a 1-note or a 2-note change, but it's going to make the chord feel like it's really moving around. So we're on pattern 17. Now the first thing you need to ask yourself, do you want a rhythm to the chords or do you want to hold your chords? And I'll show you an example. If I play in time, let me lower the sound a little bit. You have to ask yourself, do you want long chords or do you want rhythmic chords? And of course, you're not going to play the same D minor chord. I was just playing that for example. So I'm going to show you how to create chord progressions for those who don't have MIDI keyboards. So we're going to type in notes. But there's a system behind understanding the chord progression. So first, we're going to go to our channel rack, right click and open up the piano roll for pattern 17. The first thing you have to understand is which scale are you using. Now again, you don't want to get locked into scales, but there's a way to create chords from scales, and we go over that in chord magic specifically at busyworksbeats.com. But anyway, let's get into the starting chord. You have to ask yourself, where do you want to start? I want to hear the note D for some reason. My ear just wants to hear that note. So let's start with the note D. Okay, now the first thing we can do is ask ourselves, do we want rhythmic or do we want long chords? I want rhythmic chords. So let's start with the rhythm first, and then let's build the chord. Then I want it to go down in pitch, so I want to go. That's the rhythm I want. 1, 1, 2, 1. Okay, that's just the rhythm I want to hear. My ear wants it to hear a higher pitch, go to a lower pitch, back to the higher pitch. Doesn't matter where you start. It could be in a different key. It could be this key, for example. Okay, that's just what my ear wants to hear energy-wise. Okay, so now let's get into building the chord. We can say, do we want to go up or down? And our course specifically called Chord Magic At busyworksbeats.com, we show you how to reverse engineer chords. It's a really high technology you can use if you only have one note in your mind and you want to learn how to build out the rest of the chord. There's a technology for that. We teach you that in Chord Magic. Technology meaning a thought system. Okay, there's a technology of thought. Okay, anyway, we're going to go to D. We're going to work our way up instead of backwards. So let's start at D. Let's go to F. Let's go to A. What we're doing here is skipping every other note in the scale. The scale contains all the white notes. So if I were to have all the notes, it would be C, D, E, F, G, and A. We're just skipping every other note in the scale, which is every other white note. So we're skipping E going to F, skipping G going to A. I have to keep it simple because I'm not trying to take up too much time. But again, we have a whole course called Music Theory in a Day, which covers that concept. Okay, so I have to ask, does this chord sound good? It sounds decent, okay, but let's say that's not the chord I was thinking about in my head. I could say, okay, D must not be the bottom note. It must not be the root note of the chord. It must be the top note that I hear in my head. So I'm going to work backwards. And here's one of the techniques from Chord Magic. Okay, you take the scale and you work backwards. You skip every other note going the other way. Instead of up, you go down. And this is just a simplified version of it. There's a lot more to it, but that's the beginning step. So you have to ask yourself, does this G major chord sound good? It sounds a little too off the mood of the song. So my ear was right the first time. D minor, D, F, and A, D, F, and A, D, F, A works. So now we're going down to C, and we have to ask ourselves, okay, what's the C chord? So in the scale of A natural minor or C major, C, E, G, which is C major, I'm going to simplify it, is the chord for C. Now, again, you would do the same technique, skipping every other note within the scale. Okay, so you have that type of sound. Now, this piano in particular is very long. Notice how if I tap the note, it has a long release time. So I'm going to take off the release of the sound, mainly by turning off the reverb to check if it's the reverb. But it's actually the actual key. So let's hear it without reverb first. I like it without reverb because it's straight to the point. It doesn't have a long tail to it, which creates a certain mood to the sound. Now what I want to do is add a high pass filter to the sound to kind of make it light and playful. Let's change the type to HP, which stands for high pass filter. Let's turn our cutoff frequency down, which is going to allow more high frequencies to come through and less low frequencies. Now notice how I'm filtering out a lot of these sounds because, again, you're going to only have one or two focal points in your song. Okay, and all these rhythms, you don't want them to take away from the movement of the track. Now this piano chord, I want it to play a little behind the tempo, so it's not right on the beat, and kind of right now it blends in with everything else because it hits right on the downbeat. So to make it stand out a little bit, we're going to go to our options, our wrench miscellaneous functions, and let's turn time shift up a little bit. So it has a little delay, and if you remember from part 2, that bass is delayed a little bit, so it kind of lines up with the bass. Now some house music, I'm going to show you now, creates a double octave bass for the chords. So to do that, go back to your piano roll, select all your bass notes or your root notes, hit Control C to copy and paste it. Then we're going to hit Control down, okay, to create a lower octave bass note. Now remember, we cut out those frequencies using the high pass filter, so you might not hear all the content, but it still creates some tonality of the low end. So I'm going to copy and paste again, and I'm going to hit Control down twice now so that I have 2 octaves of the D root note, and then I have the actual triad up top. And that creates a very heavy bass support. So if I take off the high pass filter, let's go back to the plugin. Let's take that filter off and let's solo this sound. It has more of a pop kind of bluesy feel. Okay, so that can be helpful in a lot of, let's hear this just in context. It's just a little too much bass. If I turn off the bass, let's hear it. And it changes the mood also. It makes it more serious and emotional, more of a storytelling type of thing. So let's get rid of that low end bass. Let's just keep that 1 octave bass. And I'm going to add that filter back. We're going to keep the tonality of the bass, but we're going to get rid of the heavy kind of presence of the bass. Okay, so now we're creating a more rhythmic environment for the song. And that's how we, that's a quote unquote chord progression. Now, what I'm going to show you here is how to create variations within your chord without doing too much to the actual chord. So right here is where the melody changes up, bars 3 to 4 and 7 to 8. So our chords need to match that change up in energy. So we're going to go here, make unique. That's going to clone pattern 17 into pattern 18. I'm going to edit pattern, and I'm going to change the top notes of this chord. So instead of playing C major, which is C, E, G, we're going to play something else. So my ear wants to hear E for some reason, so I'm going to drag these notes up to E. So the top note, here's one of the reverse engineering techniques. Whatever you hear in your head is most likely the top note. There's other ways to go through this reasoning, again, in Chord Magic from busyworksbeats.com. Notice how this note sounds off because it's not in the scale, so we're going to move that down to C. Now, if you remember part 2, or the it was part 2, we did the same thing basically with the pad swell. But my ear wants to hear a C up here, so instead of using the C as a root note, I'm going to select it and hit Control up. This is called a chord inversion, okay, just a different way to play the same notes, but in different octaves. Okay, so that's how you can change the energy up using a chord inversion. We go over chord inversions in music theory in a day, as well as chord magic if you already have music theory in a day. Anyway, so let's go back to the song mode. So now on the ending bars, let's make this unique. And again, we're going to copy that same repetitive aspect of the chords. We're just going to repeat it, dun, 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 and we're going to match the rhythm of the the pluck sound. Okay, so if you remember part 2, this is the same rhythm of the pluck. It goes dun 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 dun. Okay, and at the end it doesn't go dun dun dun, it goes dun dun. Okay, so let's match that. Now for the piano, it just sounds a little too aggressive. So what I'm going to do here is just go every beat. I'm going to add the chord. Now my ear's saying there's too much movement going on. You have the sound effects swell. You have the rhythm of the pluck. You have a lot going on. So what I'm going to do is cut back on the pluck rhythm, cut back on the bass. Since I added that sound effect swell, it kind of added a new dimension to the buildup. But that sounds too bare. You know, it kind of cuts out of nowhere. So we have to add the melody and the bass back. So maybe, I would change that up, but let's just leave it as is. Okay, so now let's deal with the volume of the piano. Again, you want it to be heard, but you don't want it to stand out amongst everything. Now remember, panning can be your best friend. You could have it at a low volume, but panned so it can be perceived, but it doesn't have to be super loud. Now also, the plucks and the bass have fifth tones to them. So I'm going to go back to the pluck. I'm going to take out the fifth tone so that it meshes more musically with the sound. I don't think Silent One, I added the fifth pluck element. So I'm going to go back to circle 2 and take out the +5 semitone. I'm going to pull that back to 0. So it's more musically in tune. for the breakdown, so you can see where you have to kind of go back in time and check things. Now, keep in mind, this series is not for beginners because it's so many concepts you have to understand before you even get into, half the subjects we went over. But anyway, I'm going to add more high pass filter to the drum break so that it's a little more lightweight. Okay, so this is part 3 again of the house series for the fundamentals of music theory. Again, the essentials of music theory. You want to click that link below for music theory in a day. That's going to teach you the fundamentals, the core elements, the core understandings of music, so you can understand these higher levels of application. For the higher levels of application, for example, those reverse engineering techniques, chord inversions, etc., you want to grab Chord Magic from busyworksbeats.com. We're going to leave a link below. What else did we go over in this video? We went over chords, and that was it for this video. It's pretty short compared to the other videos. Now in the next video, we're going to go over builds and drops, how to build up the energy and how to drop it down, and why it's even called a build and a drop. Okay, so like the video, please, and share with your friends, and subscribe if you're new. I'd appreciate it. All right, thanks for watching today. It's busyworksbeats.com.